Hey, how the hell is it going? Rich here. Welcome back to the studio. It's snowing outside, our first big snowstorm, and what better way to celebrate it than to do some anatomy drawing. Got my hot cocoa here, and I'm going to do a profile shot. It's generally how I start off sketching if I have no idea what I'm going to be doing. Just little warm-ups. I always start off with a circle. And before I go any further, let me just do a shout out to the man who requested this anatomy video. His name is Phantom Wide, and I'm probably going to do a screenshot right here. Boop. And here's your anatomy video, bro. I'm going to be doing more because this one only covers really just arms, a little bit of torso that I'm doing right here. This is the shape for the rib cage that I do. It's basically an oval when I'm working on the side view. And something that I learned from Jim Lee, he doesn't break his anatomy figures down into cylinders and blocks and these very basic shapes. He has a cheat sheet, kind of a mental cheat sheet of what shape muscles and body parts are. Arms, pretty simple, you can do cylinders, but when it comes to very muscular figures, you want to know your anatomy. And when you know anatomy and musculature, it's not just straight cylinders. You're blocking out the muscles. You're using more like football shapes or elongated whatevers. So here I am drawing off screen already, but I'm working on the legs. I'm going to zoom out and I'll show you guys what that looks like. But I'm about to delve more into the arms, forearms, biceps, triceps, shoulders, and what that all looks like. For an average male figure, basically just going to have cylinders for arms like this. And it's important to know the proportions, you know, approximately how long they are. And I'll tell you right now, it's approximately the length of the head. Arms are basically going to be 2 heads long, not including the shoulder and not including the hands. So the elbow right there basically lined up with the rib cage. And this is what the upper arm looks like. You have the triceps right there on the back, biceps, and then there's one muscle that kind of wedges up in between the two and stretches down the forearm. I gotta imagine that's a pretty strong muscle to be stretching all that length. You got the elbow that falls on the back there. And I still haven't zoomed out. Come on. And then you got the shoulder right up there. And the shoulder kind of squeezes right in between the muscles too. And it's important to know how all these really weave and interconnect when you're figuring out anatomy and drawing all this stuff. And there's the hand. The hand is a very odd shape. But once you figure out your shorthand, your little code and shape that you're going to make for the hand, it's pretty simple. You can basically knock it down to 2 geometric shapes and then add on some fingers, and I'm going to show you that in a little bit too. So this is all from the side profile shot, just more detailed and bigger of, you know, that figure that I just drew. And the arm kind of tapers down to the wrist. The wrist tends to be pretty skinny, with the exception of how bony the wrist is, because you do kind of see right there in the bend of the wrist. If you're looking at your own, you should see the bone kind of protruding out. It's not all muscle on the exterior. So yeah, anatomy is a fun subject to draw. I love drawing anatomy. I never really got into the whole fruit bowl thing and still lifes that they want you to learn in college. That was always super boring for me. But anatomy, I can just draw people in random poses all day long, just mixing it up. Just so many, it's unlimited the amount of drawings you can do of like the body as far as poses go, and then you rotate the pose from different angles and you can change the lighting on the poses. Yeah. So once you know the rules, such as anatomy and proportions, and then lighting, and then perspective, if you know all 4 of those, you can be invincible. You can draw whatever you want. So here I am adding the fingers on the hand. When it comes to the hand, it's basically a rectangle. The palm portion is a square, and then the rectangles are going to be another square. And And here I am talking about how the hand bends. I didn't like the original audio, so I'm doing a voiceover. Here we go. It's kind of a square trapezoid kind of shape. I'm showing you here. It's basically a square, and then the middle finger knuckle protrudes out more. So you got the index, the middle, ring finger, and pinky knuckle. All like that, coming off this odd-shaped square. And then you have the little triangle off the side, and that's where your thumb comes out. So you got the thumb knuckle, and then the thumb extending out. Here you got the fingers that come out, and it's basically another square. You know, ratio and proportion-wise, it's another square extending out. You got to figure out your own shorthand and figure out what shapes are going to represent which body parts, because there's no one set way to do all this. And the best thing you can do is just watch a bunch of other artists. Watch a bunch of artists. Take notes on how they do it. And you're going to create your own amalgamation of all their styles and processes. And you're going to come up with something successful for yourself. Here I am, got my ink. I'm about to break out the dip pen. And I got a new nib holder. And I love it. It's a E+M nib holder. And it looks fancy as hell. It's not super expensive. It's pretty fun. I love using it. Doesn't really do anything else that, you know, the other Manga one doesn't do. But it just, you know, sometimes you hold certain tools and you're like, wow, this makes me feel great. And part of it's just feeling a certain way. It helps get you in the zone. AutoZone. No, terrible joke. But it does. It gets you in the zone. It gets you in that mental mindset of doing art and being artistic. You know, whatever help gets you in that creative zone is better for you. You know, if you're sitting at, you know, not your desk, you're sitting at a random place and you're just not feeling it, then it's going to affect how much art you do and how good that art is. But we're going to always do a few test strokes. Make sure your nib's getting that even flow. The ink is a science, art science thing. The ink flow is so weird. Richard Friend has a YouTube channel. Richard Friend is a comic book inker. And he's done a few videos talking about it. It's so strange. The ratio of ink to water and what kind of ink, and the ink tends to dry out. So you got to add more fresh ink to it, or sometimes just more water to thin it out. And sometimes it gets too thin. And then sometimes the nib just isn't working right. It's very... Listen, if you just want to use pens, go ahead and use pens. But I love the effect that I get from nibs when it's all working properly together. And the more experience you have with it, more practice, the more often you're going to have a good functioning nib and ink process, you know. There's a reason why it's still being used today in professional art industries. And it's hundreds of years old, thousands of years old, you know. It's because it's a good, effective tool with good range, you know. So yeah, I just wanted to darken the lines up, and I was like, why use a pen when I got a nib here, you know? I love this thing so much. Taking a drink of my hot cocoa over there. Finally zooming in. If you like videos like this, please go and hit that thumbs up button. Comment what anatomy I should do next. You know, leg, feet, torso. I'll probably be doing torso and the back next. Those are always really fun. And I guess this is kind of specifically male anatomy. Now, women have the same anatomy on hands and arms, so yeah. So this is applicable to both genders. And there I am kind of drawing the wrist. Look, the fingers all kind of come down through the hand to the wrist. Those finger bones, they really do. They just extend down. It's kind of strange when you look at just the bone anatomy of humans and how those hands work. But they also kind of angle in to the center of the wrist bone. So just something to think about when you're drawing hands and studying them. So, and when you're drawing arms and any part of the human body, really, you kind of think about it like an action figure. There's joints and sockets, the way the bones and limbs fit into the torso. It's almost like sockets when you look at action figures and you pose them and move them around. I don't have any toys. I'm not a toy collector or action figure collector. Statues, I don't really do that stuff. I would collect good statues, but they're pretty expensive, some of them. So, and here I am looking at the musculature and how it all just wraps around and wraps. And, you know, you have to know the volume of the object, how it wraps and moves in space. And if you had a graph and you laid it down over the musculature, what would it look like? It's kind of like that. That's basically what I'm doing. Some of these exercises are really good to do just regularly as an artist to keep yourself from, you know, if you don't do it often enough, you'll just forget, or muscle memory, you know. It's always good to refresh, and every time you refresh, you get a little better. Your art becomes a little bit more believable. Yeah. So you have that bicep on the front, that's the longer one. Tricep is up a little higher. It's generally same location, but it's shorter. It's not as long as the bicep. And then you have this forearm muscle, I don't know what it's called. But it stretches all the way down and across. It kind of wraps around the arm. And then locks into the wrist down there. It goes all the way down. You got that elbow. And then there's like 2 sets of muscles actually on that other side. It's very interesting how it all works. If you don't have an anatomy book, I've heard good things about George Bridgman's book. John Hamm, I think is his name. He has good books, and they're a little cheaper. Not as good as Bridgman, or I think his name is Hogarth. But I have the Dynamic Anatomy book. I think that's Hogarth. And that one's very interesting. That's a good read. Not that there's a whole lot of reading, but look through it, study it, practice the drawings that you see in there. It's always good stuff. Or you can study how I study and just buy a bunch of comic books and trace Jim Lee's art. Because Jim Lee is the man. He is basically Burns Hogarth and George Bridgman and Frank Frazetta all rolled into one together. It's dynamic anatomy. Very dynamic. Here I am kind of delineating, you know, that muscle and how it wraps and, you know, because it's a solid object. It's not flat. But it's like, how do you convey a solid object on a flat piece of paper? It's very interesting. And this is the tricep from the back. If you're looking at this arm from the back side, tricep is 2 parts, basically. And it wraps around the elbow portion there. And there's that forearm muscle and the other side of the forearm. Yeah, that one forearm muscle, it's really interesting. It's way more muscular. And I don't know. I always try, and I think I always emphasize it. Maybe I overemphasize it in some of my drawings, but it's how the triceps kind of wrap and, you know, work together. Going down to the wrist. I'll have to do like an entire video on hands, because one video covering arms and hands honestly isn't enough. And there's just no way you can learn everything you need to know about hands without actually working on it on your own. I love watching YouTube videos, but you can't become a better artist just by watching YouTube videos. You gotta eventually turn them off and practice what you learned. So, this is always fun to work on, especially when you're snowed in. We go with the fingers. I honestly wasn't trying too hard on these fingers. They look terrible, but I didn't want to just leave that unfinished there. Beefing up some lines. Having a lot of fun with this dip pen, honestly. Start throwing in some hatching. This is good stuff to work on. Yeah. Working on those contour lines. Contour lines should always be thicker than detail lines. And it kind of helps separate your subject from backgrounds. And if you're working in comics or animation, you know, any similar nerdy field, just make your contour lines a little thicker. Breaking out my mechanical pencil. This might be a nerd thing that nobody cares about, but I found this vintage pencil at a local store. Was it a garage sale? Somewhere. Found this vintage pencil. And it's probably my favorite pencil. And it's 0.9 lead. It's a little thicker, but I love the thicker lead anyway. So here's the forearm from the front. And if that was the torso, and there's the shoulder. So, yeah. As you can see, I don't break it down into cylinders and stuff. I kind of generally, when you get more experience, see, so there's kind of a cylinder or box shape. And the forearm is kind of this odd football shape. And then you have the cylinder extending down. And then that's my hand shape right there. It's not a box. It's almost like a triangle, but odd shaped triangle, I guess. Yeah. So yeah, it's basically a triangle, but I wouldn't simplify it to a triangle so I can, just for the sake of making it a triangle, I wouldn't do that. But that's the shape. You have the thumb and index, and that's the wrist. And that's kind of the forearm shape. Elbow. Yeah. So if you're starting out, I'm going to assume that somebody here is a first-time artist and just trying to get into it. Then maybe use basic cylinder and cube shapes. But I wouldn't. And if you are using cylinder and basic cube shapes, I would say stop. Stop. You're not going to get accurate or realistic looking proportions and anatomy. You need to have your shapes a little more complex, which means you need to study that anatomy a little bit more. Doesn't mean buy anatomy books if you don't want to buy anatomy books. Look at your manga or comic books that you have and go from there. I would say comic books are way better. I would recommend American comic books because they tend to have more musculature, more, superheroes are always more musculature. So there's more anatomy definition there. So that's my recommendation. Although Boichi, manga artist, Sunken Rock, I think is the manga. Dude, wow. The detail on that, his anatomy knowledge is amazing. And he's got a YouTube channel too. So if you didn't know that, go look for Boichi on YouTube. Friggin' amazing. He doesn't have a whole lot of videos, but he is regularly uploading like once a month. And just mind-blowing. Here I am with the dip pen, loving this dip pen. It's a G-nib, the regular manga artist one. American comic books recommend the Hunt 102, but it's more expensive, and this one came in a set with a nib holder, so that's what I got it. That's why I got it, and I love it, so I bought a bunch more. I also got a size 2 brush. I haven't broken that out yet. I broke it out briefly and started using it, but the ink was a little washy, and yeah. It's another tool. It's one you got to really practice with to be good at, but it is fun. So that's how I generally draw fists right there. It's, you know, that triangle shape, and then you wrap all the fingers in. It's not very difficult. It's a strong silhouette. Pretty easy to do. So learning anatomy is super important, especially up there with the shoulder and the torso. Ooh, right here, good part. So I always add shadow right there under that bicep, and then I add in this vein. If you work out a lot, you will notice that you have this vein there. Especially if you take C4 and creatine and all those pre-workouts, get that blood pumping. You got this vein that runs up the center of your bicep. And I usually like adding that detail there. So any little bit of detail that you add to a drawing is obviously going to add to believability. Of course, if it's not really your style, then don't do it. That's something you're going to pick up from looking at the artists that you like. You take what you want and you leave the rest. Now, next video, I'm probably going to be working on the torso. Unless somebody else has any specific requests, please comment below for any specific requests, and I'll do it. I'm more than happy to do them. So, but yeah, we work on the torso and biceps and back muscles. It's all fun stuff. If you like the video so far, please go and hit that thumbs up button, comment, subscribe, ring that bell for notifications. Small channel, enjoy just entertaining people and spreading the knowledge that I do have. I'm not an expert, but I do love doing this stuff. So I'll see you guys in the next video. I'm not sure when that'll be coming out. Life gets in the way sometimes, hectic schedules, and homeschooling kids. So anyway, thank you guys for showing up. I appreciate it. And let me know if you got anything useful out of this video. So bye.